We're live and we got Theresa here. Theresa Smith, right? Theresa? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I couldn't get more
Yeah.
generic if you tried.
You could
You
say that
know,
we
I'm
can.
I'm yeah. My office manager actually met Theresa and I reached out to her and Theresa, tell us about yourself. Tell us about who you are and why my office manager would have met you.
Oh my goodness. Who I am, that's a long road. I think essentially I met your office manager, who is delightful, by the way. I really enjoyed speaking with her. She's
Is this
like,
P?
Yeah,
yeah,
you don't have to suck up to her. She's not here. She won't
yeah,
even
that's okay.
listen
But
to
I,
us.
I do feel like where I like giving credit where credit's due. She's vivacious
Yeah.
and has a passion for what she does. And I really kind of um I feel like a connection to those type of people because that's how I am about things in life. And so it was really
I can
great to
already
meet
hear
someone
it already. You're
like-minded.
probably going to start yelling at me too, because that's all
Yeah,
the
I
questions she
know.
does to me. So
Those are the
it's
best relationships, right? Those are healthy. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, no, so I had an opportunity to meet her. She's fantastic. It's just at a course that me and Chrissy Ford had put on for dental business.
What's that?
Um, Chrissy Ford is a hygiene consultant. She's a practicing hygienist. She's an office manager, and she helps me out a lot of time with the practices I have to coach hygienists, which I know unlock, the large majority of the practice production. And so getting them on board is crucial into making progress in practices. And so Chrissy is crucial in what we do. So we use her a lot. So we decided to partner together and put on this course, which is where I met your office manager.
yeah.
But it was awesome to meet her. It was a really great group of people that came to that course as well. So a lot of interaction, a lot of questions. Um, you know, my biggest thing is just trying to get people to understand that like it's okay to talk about the business of dentistry, because I think there's
Yeah.
a bit of like shame around it and a bit of
There
people
is.
think
We're
it's
healthcare workers, not business people. We're here
yeah.
for patients, right? We don't have to really run the business side of things until we go bankrupt.
Well, or on threatening of bankruptcy, right? Which happens a lot. Like I'm not kidding. And people don't panic until it's too late. And I'm just like, you should have been panicking a year ago. Like I'm
Yeah.
panicking. You should be far beyond panicking at this point. But yeah, that's what I basically what I do, or how I got into this role is we go into practices. We have three different things going on in our business, Optimize Dental. So we part of it is we go into practices and we do in-clinic support. So that's like in the clinic job training. We kind of help the clinic business plan. We help them push through to the next level if they're scaling or transitioning out of a practice or transitioning into practices. Or if one of their team members have to transition out of practice, it's a crucial person. So they bring us in and we help them walk through that process. And then the other portion that we have is the training center. So we have a one-on-one training center for guidance and administrative rules for business, for office managers or business managers. So we have training for that. We do associate development as well. So associates that are coming new into the practices that don't understand how to run a practice within a practice and how to build themselves up. We do some training there as well. And then
Wow. I didn't even know
yeah,
that existed. That is so powerful because no
yeah.
one is ever training associates. And
No,
I'm
it's
I'm
kind of,
talking to my associates and I'm like, same day dentistry, do this, do that. And they just look at
yeah.
me like a deer in the headlights.
Well,
And
essentially
that's
that's
great.
it. So we do a bit of that, and then we also have remote recare, which is just new. We launched it, and it's basically mobile support for offices that struggle with being able to get those calls out and those contacts out for those overdue patients, and reactivating and building their perio program. So we work with clinics and we'll remote into their practice and make those calls with educated people that know how to make good quality calls and getting those patients booked back or brought back into the practice. So we have that going on right now, which is a lot. and it's fun and we're excited about it, but we're full throttle at this point in our career. So it's pretty exciting.
So just to jump right into it, my understanding of what you do is you kind of help dentists get over that hurdle of running the business, and you coach them. Now, from a dentist perspective, where everything we do is, hands-on, how do you coach someone virtually, and how do you coach a team virtually?
So for depending on what we're doing, as far as like the one-on-one training side, we have markers, benchmarks, and analytics that we pull from their practice that we teach them how to read and navigate and perpetuate essentially. So we're going to project information into their practice. So we're going to say, this is what you have been doing. Where is your clinical goals? How are we going to build that out? Here's how you get there operationally. This is the leadership skills you need to develop in order to get there. And we break it all down into steps for them every week. They have homework every week. They have to go back and apply these skills so that it retains. And then we build on those retained skills to kind of level up every week. And then we renegotiate the clinical goals or the leadership goals or the financial goals of where we're headed. So yeah, and then we do that
find that
virtually.
completely. It's just fascinating to me. Like you're going to teach dentists, first of all, not only how to run their practice, how to look at their numbers, because we don't learn that in dental school. I don't care what dental school you go to, you don't learn exactly how to run your practice, what key performance indicators we should be looking at. I'm still learning 14 years out about what I should be looking at, what I shouldn't really pay attention to, but it's just crazy. But then you also you're teaching dentists how to be leaders too. Like how do you build those skills?
Oh, it's not easy. I'm not gonna lie. So obviously our team of trainers that we work with have been office managers. They all work in corporate dental. And we have developed programs and systems that have helped us kind of trial by error when we were doing it. And so now we're like, okay, this is how you're going to replicate it. Oh, this is the personality type. And like I said, at our warm up here, my lovely business partner has a psychology degree. And so she often kicks ways into our system of saying, hey, maybe you should deal with it this way, or hey, here's some things that we should kind of build out on, and just talks us through it. So sometimes we feel like there's a lot of different dynamics in team members. And so kind of those interactions, they'll feed that information back to us in our one-on-ones and say, hey, like I tried this, it didn't work. Okay, let's pivot. Let's try this tactic then. And then we're going to get them to change their behavior this way. Or, maybe something's going on with them that doesn't affect you. And we just kind of work through the systems of that so that they can feel like confident in their skill building. And 90% of it comes down to better communication skills, which I think dentists generally on the scope of things lack because they're so focused on the clinical side. And it is not something that's bad. It is literally you have to be a good dentist, you have to focus so much on the clinical. And so when you're going through school, your whole drive is to be clinical. Your whole focus is to be clinical. Because if you aren't good at it, you won't pass your classes. You won't make it to the next level. And so train ourselves, or dentists train themselves to continue that habit well into their practice years. And then they forget the other side, which is the communication side, the leadership side, the being able to, the business side, and develop that side, because they also have to be a dentist. Otherwise, the clinic doesn't run. It's a very interesting niche of profession, and there's not many like it. And so it's a struggle to help them build this out, but it's really rewarding when they get it, because once it unlocks and you get a good team culture and the business is profitable and the dentistry is good, it's like, oh, it's just beautiful. I love it.
So working with dentists a lot, one thing I noticed, and I noticed this myself too, is that we love, things that we can improve that we necessarily don't have to do, right? So, you said do homework, and my reaction is, oh God, that's like one other thing that I have to do. So like, what are some things that dentists could do that are, minimal effort, but have, a pretty big ROI just like straight off the bat?
Like, you mean in what regard? Clinical, in financial, or in their personal?
Or like whatever you see are the low-hanging fruits, because obviously everyone wants to run a successful practice, everyone wants to run an efficient practice, but I don't see a lot of dentists, going home and like writing in their binders and like doing their homework, per se. So like, what are some of the low-hanging fruits that you see that you can, address immediately without having to put in, a ton of time and a ton of effort before you see a result?
I'm going to ask you one more question because that's what I do. I ask lots of questions to get to the right answer.
Hey,
Because
you're a guest at our podcast. You don't get to ask us questions.
Yeah, what you doing here? What you doing here?
Yeah, but if I go really general, everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, that was general. It's not helpful." So I'm gonna ask one more question here. Is essentially, are you talking what stage? Are you talking startup? Or are you talking mid profession? Or are you talking transition into retirement? Because I can answer like in different regards. That answer is going to change in regards to what stage of dentistry they're at or the stage of their career they're at.
I'd say mid-profession.
Mid-profession, sure. So low-hanging fruit is developing a strong periodontal program. So generally mid-profession, if you're working into a practice that has developed and you have a decent amount of front-end staff that is, moving things forward, you have a decent set of RDAs, you have, a couple of hygienists pumping out patients, or maybe even 3 or 4 hygienists pumping out patients if you're running a mid-sized practice. Perpetuating that hygiene program is going to add the most value to your practice without more work for you. It's going to add less chaos to your practice because you're not going to see as many recalls because it's going to just perpetuate on the perio side. So you're going to have a lot more perio visits, which offer you more production at a higher grossing rate too, because you're going to be bringing home off the EBITDA a little bit higher because your hygiene is going to be at a less. If you brought in a dentist, you have to pay 40% plus equipment and supplies. So as a hygienist, you have to pay 30% and less equipment, less supplies. So you're going to make way more money developing a periodontal program. A strong periodontal program is going to be a way higher ROI than pretty much any other thing. That is like literally the easiest thing to do. And if you can get your hygiene program or your hygienist on with buy-in, then you're laughing. And that's not easy to do. So it's low-hanging fruit, but motivating a hygiene team, you have to kind of understand the drivers behind it and like what they need to hear and how you're going to invest in them in order to get that return on investment. But that's just communication and leadership. That's not doing homework. That's not you producing. That has nothing to do with you doing the work. It's literally leadership and communication that you have to spend time on. But I don't want to say that you're not going to have easy wins anywhere. Low-hanging fruit, they all need work, they all need operational planning, they all need execution. And that's where doctors, I find, get hung up. They have this great idea, everyone knows, like it's the easiest answer, everyone knows periodontal program is going to be a really high reward. What are you doing about it? How are you investing in them? How are you motivating them to get there? Like, how are you building it out? What's your plan? Are you bringing in temps? Are you expanding this way? Do you have the front end to support it? Like, there's so many things that go into it. So it's really like easy to answer, yeah, periodontal program, but there's no easy money. It doesn't just come in. It is, but it is the best. It's going to hire your return on investment. And honestly, the way they're evaluating practices now, hygiene program is going to be your main winner because that's all the dentists really care about. How much is your hygiene producing? Because they also know that means that they don't have to work as hard if the hygiene program is doing well.
That's so interesting. Because I've been through these practice growth stages of our own practice in my career, and you're absolutely right. A periodontal program was absolutely crucial in allowing us to grow our practice and kind of take it to the next level. But what I'm noticing amongst dentists, amongst myself and a lot of my colleagues, is there's life cycles of the dentist. There's, the first 1 to 3 years, everyone's so excited. All the dentists get together and they only talk about teeth. Like there's nothing else exists, but I once had a patient who had a toothache and I did this. And like now 5 years later, you're like, you don't talk about teeth at all. And during those first couple of years, everyone's excited. During like year 5 to 7, you lose that spark a little bit, and you're kind of trying to find yourself as a dentist, trying to figure out what kind of dentist you really want to be for the next 25 years. I'm sure you've seen this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. How do you guide dentists that are still new, like they're in their 5-year range? How do you guide them and kind of lead them down a path of success, whether that's owning a practice or getting better at dentistry? Like, how do you grow that dentist?
Oh, that's a really great question. So we like to focus on, again, establishing a good set of goals, on like where they want to be or where they actually have an idea of where they want to be, and then exploring through those. Because it's just like, I don't know, if you guys probably went to university and knew what you were going to be and went to dental school and now are like, this is what I'm going to be. But
Yeah.
Actually,
the
not
rest
at
of
all,
us,
but
oh,
go on.
but the rest of us maybe went through life and tried to figure it out in our 20s. And we're like, oh, I'll try
Yeah.
this. Oh, I'll try this. Oh, I'll try this. Essentially, we kind of have to go through a bit of that kind of growing pain process with dentists in the beginning. So the idea that we make sure that they're in the right practice for them, where they're getting the things that they need. And sometimes that means relocating them out of a practice or finding something that's more suitable, whether that be to fit their needs. And so essentially we talk about what their needs are, because you have to do that. And sometimes it's like, we have so much debt, which is like always the first thing that everyone says, I need to pay off my debt. And I'm like, okay, like I obviously don't completely understand it, because I don't have $500,000 worth of debt in my bank account eating at me every day, but I do understand debt load and managing it. And sometimes it's just getting comfortable with the debt load, because that doesn't really go away, especially if you're going to buy a practice. You have to be understanding of like how you're going to manage it, how you're going to pay it off. So we talk about needs, what that financial needs are, what your physical needs are, and then essentially where you want to head. And so then we talk about their goals, as far as like what clinical goals do they want, and we have them set some priorities of that clinical goal. So we make them do a bit of deep thinking in the beginning. So that kind of homework is really important when we want to set some goals for them. So we figure out where you're sitting clinically, like, are you happy with what you're doing? Is the first thing I ask everyone. Are you happy where you're at? And if they're like, yeah, like, then we change nothing and we just build on it. Right. If I had this happen to me, or like I couldn't get this wisdom tooth out, and I had to send to oral surgery, and like these things happen. They happen to veteran dentists too. Like, I don't understand why the younger dentists, or like the more junior dentists, freak out as much, because it's the first time it happens to them, but it happens to everyone. And so, I mean, I also manage a specialty practice. So if they don't think it doesn't happen to veteran dentists who teach places, it does. It happens to everyone. So just take that off your list.
Looking straight at me and telling me this. Like, she's like,
But
Nikki, you F up more than anyone I know. So
no,
I love it.
but I'm just saying it can happen. And so we talk about like clinical goals, like where are you at? Like, are you comfortable with where you're sitting clinically? And if they're like, no, I'm not. Okay, cool. Let's find you some mentorship. Let's find you someone who's good at this, and we'll buddy you up, and we'll have conversations, and we'll find them someone that's in the community, but not too close to their community, that can help them walk through some stuff, do some case study stuff. So we build in a bit of mentorship with them to make sure that they're set up. And then we also talk about like financial goals, like where they want to be. Do they want to own a practice? Is that on the table? Do they want to be an associate? Is that on the table? And then we actually, at the beginning, we talk to them about their exit strategy. And it sounds so random to talk to someone that's been out for 1 year, like how are you getting out of dental? Is like one of the first things that I ask them, and they're just like, I just got into dental. I'm like, yeah, but you need to know, if you're gonna buy, then we need to financially plan to buy. And if you're going to be an associate, you need to financially plan to exit, because those are two different strategies in a career for dental. And if you're not planning those from the beginning, you might not get where you want to be in the long term, especially with dental university costs now. It's just the debt load gets higher and higher every year. And it's just something that we focus on with them as well. So once we get those things settled down, then we work towards goals operationally. Then we start building on that and kind of work through what they would like to do, and it's customized to them. So it is a lot of coaching on that side, but it is a lot of financial planning. It's a lot of life planning. It's a lot of structure. And then we start working on the operations of what they're doing. Do we need to make changes? How do we build that? And we teach them the business of dentistry while we're doing it, so that they have a good understanding of that and are able to make better decisions, because maybe they don't think they want to buy. And this happens to two people now that I've worked with. they were going to be long-term associates. They were like, I don't want to own. And now both of them have bought practices. So once they understand the business, it's a lot less scary. And they can kind of mentorship underneath it. And now they're doing really, really well. And I'm just super happy for them.
So, sort of whenever I talk to people or we have people on the podcast that, are on that business side of dentistry, or, any service that services dentistry, I find like all roads lead to, happiness, right? Like what's going to make the dentist happiest? Why do you want to make more money? To be happier? Why do you want to get rid of, stress in your life to be happier? What are, and you mentioned just before we started recording that your partner or someone you work with on the team there has a psychology degree. What characteristics in particular does the happiest client you've seen have? Like, are they someone who makes the most money? Are they someone that deals with the least amount of admin? Are they someone who does the most amount of dentistry or the most amount of stuff they love? What are those characteristics?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Yeah. Yeah. I think I like how deep that question is, but I think I'm going to break it down into two parts. So one is the dentists that I find that are the most happy currently are the ones that feel comfortable with the progress that they're making. Okay, so happiness isn't a future goal for those people. Happiness is where they are. And I find that those people are the most stable in their business. They're the most stable in their emotions, which keeps their business stable. They're most generally, if something happens to them, they're the quickest to rebound. If something traumatic happens to the practice, or someone exits or whatever, they're the quickest to rebound because they're like, it's okay. I'm happy with the progress that we're doing. They have a clear set of goals. So those are the people that stay focused on their plan and their plan of action. Those people tend to be the happiest because they tend to be more comfortable with the progress steps that they're in. I think that it doesn't really matter what stage of career they're in for this, though, because I've seen young dentists very happy with the progress. That's okay. I'm moving forward. I'm resilient. This is okay. And I've seen veteran dentists do it. And I've also seen the most unhappy veteran dentists that are, exiting, and they're super frustrated with everything. And the most unhappy junior dentists, so it doesn't matter what stage of life they're in. And it doesn't matter necessarily what's happening with their team. It's more about what they feel they're controlling and taking accountability for what they can control and pushing the rest off. Like, that happens. This is business. I have a plan. And they mitigate a lot of risk in their operations too, actually, I think, which is a big part of it. So because they're kind of keeping their thumb on the pulse of the practice, they're constantly aware of like the little things that happen and are able to mitigate a lot of risk. So if they feel like someone's like disengaging, they know that and they're able to accommodate it. So whether they do that with an office manager or without an office manager, whether they do that with another team lead or another member or another dentist, they still know what's going on in their practice. And so they stay remaining fairly focused on their practice. And typically those people don't have a lot of children.
Uh-oh.
So true. So true.
Yeah, that's the biggest difference I find is those people typically don't have a lot of children, because business ownership is not for the faint of heart. It is a lot of work.
The characteristics you're basically saying are present and self-aware. And I find people with children are often quite present and quite self-aware. So what do you think that correlation is?
They're present and self-aware with their family. They're less present and self-aware with their business. They prioritize things differently. There are some that, I'm not saying it's everyone, I'm just saying typically that's what I see. If they don't have really large families that demand a lot of their time, energy, then they're good. And there's people that have, like, there's 2 dentists I'm working with right now that have families and like large families, and they work with them and stuff, but their partner takes care of most of the families and they focus on the business. They're not trying to juggle both sides of their life and the business at the same time. I think that if people want to be really, really happy and they don't want to have to make that decision, they need to get a business manager. And that will help kind of that off and that workload off. But that requires trust. And we know that that's difficult as well.
I was just going to say that exact same thing. It was like, I want to add an asterisk. It may not just be a family. Like I don't have any children, but I'm always traveling, teaching, or I'm working on a lecture and I'm racing out of the office every day. But it all works if you have that trusted office manager, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it doesn't have to just be a family. It just be
any other side thing that's good. Yes.
But I do have a great office manager to help with that. But you're totally right. Like man, a year, not like 2 weeks ago, she sits me down and she's like, "Where's your head at?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I got this shit to do. I got a podcast in 20 minutes. Like, do we really have to have this conversation right now? I haven't even eaten lunch yet." And she's like, "You need to get your head back in the game because you are in 10 different places at once. And what is the most important thing? Your practice. So you need to decide what you need to shelf and you need to be more present." And so I totally hear exactly what you're saying. And it was like that wake up call I needed to be like, okay, Nikki, like she's right. I'm an idiot because I'm the most valuable part of my life I'm neglecting just so I can chase admiration from, colleagues that I'm never even going to meet. You know what I mean?
But you know what? There's value in that. It's okay. It's okay to do things like that. It's okay.
Balance.
Yeah.
Balance.
Yes. And I think it's important to like, just if you have someone that's going to partner like that with you and push you back, that's pull the reins back in and like make sure that you're staying on track. That's super great. And if you can surround yourself with people that can support you that way, I mean, that helps mitigate the risk of you disengaging too far. Right. And so you need to be able to disengage somewhat because you won't be happy if you don't, right? Like I think we have to take holidays at some point. Like even my company, like I have a hard time leaving my company alone, even though I have a business partner that can run half the company. It's like my portion of it, I feel control over. And if I'm not there, then I feel like, oh, geez, like I need to make sure everything's aligned. I need to make sure everything's set up, and I leave it alone and just hope for the best. But you got to be able to separate in order to kind of renew, refresh, and get back and not lose your passion or drive like that. I think that's kind of what happens in that 5 to 7 year period is you burn out as a dentist. And then you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. Like, this is stupid. I don't like it. And we do see a lot of professionals like leave the profession because they're just like, I hate this. I hate it.
I don't think people really understand how hard dentistry really is.
It's so hard. Hard.
It is like taxing, and our partners, when we come home, they don't understand and like, I know it's easy for me to say they don't understand, but like they don't understand having patients like consume your mind and like whether your treatment works out, whether you can pay the bills, whether your staff is happy with you, whether your assistant calls you an asshole behind your back. You know what I mean? Like these things, they weigh on you and you wish they would go away. But the second one problem goes away, two more problems prop their head up, and it's tough. And if anyone figures out the true secret to dentistry, I like, please tell me, man, because it's hard. That's why I got Theresa in my corner here.
Yeah, I don't know any secrets.
You're kind of you're caught in those golden handcuffs, right? Because you make so much damn money in dentistry. So, should you have to, step away from it, or should you have to even take a temporary break from it? You know exactly how much that's going to cost you. Right. You know exactly how much that opportunity cost is. Yeah.
And it's tricky to maneuver to, and that's why we talk about exit strategies right off the get. And it like I said, it always sounds so weird. And it kind of shocks dentists when we talk about it. It's like, what's your plan to get out of this? Because like, this is it. You might need to get out of it sooner than you think. And if you're not focused, I'm not saying you have to focus like wholeheartedly, like, oh, I need to get out of dentistry. But if you're not setting a goal for it, I've seen dentists work till they're 80 years old, far past when they probably should be practicing dentistry. But we know that they're out there and it is a thing, and they're tired and they can't keep up and their dentistry isn't good. And I mean, that's what happens. But they have no choice because they haven't made a plan to get out soon enough. And so now they're stuck doing things that they don't want to do. And there's nothing like, it doesn't matter if it's dentistry, it doesn't matter. If you hate what you're doing, how happy are you going to be? Right? Like, how are you going to find that like life source that you need to keep doing it every day? Yeah, that's not a fun situation to be in.
How do you manage coaching someone who effectively has never had a boss, has been, the ruler of their team since, maybe they're like mid to late 20s, and that just makes a ton of money? And people, like patients say to dentists all the time, it's like, you walk on water, right? It's like, you took me out of pain. Like, how do you coach that personality?
Well, they're not all like that. They're not all like super eccentric.
If a patient told me I walked on water, oh my God, that would make my year.
Yeah. Yeah. You mean probably, yeah, I can just
they're probably
imagine.
like, you put me in pain and now it really hurts.
Yeah,
Now what are
you
you
would
gonna
walk
do?
on
And I'm
water
like,
for a year.
oh God. Yeah.
I think you wouldn't walk on water for a year. You'd walk on water for a week until the next patient that said, you hurt me. This was horrible. And then you would focus on that for a week. And then you would go, oh, I had a good review. And I focus on that for a week. But I think essentially the characteristics of dentistry or dentists, I mean, I've been working with dentists now for like over 15 years and with a wide variety, specialty, general. So I think I've met every personality type of dentist there are out there. It comes down to helping them achieve their goals. They just want someone in their corner. So if we can help them get someone in their corner where they feel like they're fighting the fight with someone, it's almost like it's just easy for me at that point, because essentially I'm saying, I'm helping you, this is how I'm going to help you, and we communicate. I'm a big communicator, so I over communicate with my dentist. What do you want out of this program? Where do you want to be? How are we gonna get there? We send reports every week, we send like analytics every week, we figure out where they're at, we track goals. Like, all of those things go into how we manage the dentist, and managing the dentist's emotions, and managing the dentist's fears, and managing the dentist's progress. All of those things go into that so that they feel comfortable. Interesting enough, so we had a dentist we were working with, and he's freaking out because we brought on some more staff because we're expanding. And so anytime you bring on more staff to expand, we know that staff costs hurt a little bit. There's a short-term hurt on that staff cost ratio.
Totally. Yep.
But if you don't do it, you're going to be driving the team that you have way too hard in order to expand. And then more than likely, someone's going to walk out on you and you're going to be down a staff member. So I like to overstaff during the growth period. I think that's the best way to kind of keep that culture happy and to build in a happy manner. But the dentists struggle with it because they see the staff costs go up because we're watching analytics and they're like, oh, the staff costs are high. And I'm like, yeah, but like, it's only moved like 1%. And I just made you on the EBITDA and like another $30,000 this month. Like, yeah, it's moved one target, one, point ratio up, but you brought home $30,000 more this month than you did the previous month. So you're freaking out because the one thing is up. And then, next month will be even higher ratio or higher production because now we have the staff to push it and make it happen. We don't have the staff to support it. We wouldn't be able to do that. And so it's just interesting. But if you don't track those things and manage the analytics and kind of work through those systems, the dentist just freaks out and then shuts down and says, okay, we all let some staff go. Like, I can't, it's just too much.
Yeah.
And then they're back to where they wanted to be and they never hit that next goal or never hit that next level because they have this maybe imposter syndrome. Like, we can't do it. Right. And then we never get to that next level.
I was just going to say, like, more so what I meant there was, sort of a continuation of Necky's point about how partners of dentists don't understand, that aspect of it. I think it's great, to know that you're in my corner. You want to see me win. You only win if I win. All those like catchphrases are amazing on a first date, maybe the first month. maybe the first couple of months. But when you are effectively telling a dentist, okay, yeah, like Mr. Hotshot, you've done 8 years of school, but you're still screwing up this basic HR thing. How do you manage to, maybe break the news, or how do you coach a dentist from the
Oh,
get-go to say, well, listen, you know, I'm not here to step on your toes, but I'm going to tell you what you're doing is wrong. I'm going to tell you the flaws in your strategy, the flaws in your thought. Because again, these are people that a lot of the time have not had a boss ever,
mhm.
right? Even as
Yeah.
an associate, they're not really your boss. You still have that autonomy. So now you have someone who's not a dentist, who is, probably a lot of the time you're younger than them, right? Coming in,
Sometimes.
coming into their office and saying, hey, you're doing, what you're doing is wrong. How do you manage that relationship?
So I never ever tell anyone they're doing anything wrong. That first off, I never put anyone on the defensive. So everything I say, okay, tell me what you're doing. Okay. And then I say, are you finding success in that? And then they're like, no. Okay, tell me why you think you're not finding success. And then they'll tell me why. And I'll say, okay, here's my thought. And then I'll lay out what I think. And I think because now I've gathered the data to support my thought process. I say, I think maybe we should go this way. With this data, I see these things happening. What are your thoughts on projecting this direction with this plan and these operation tactics and this broken down step by step? And I lay it out completely to literally the bottom line. Say, this is how we're doing it. These are the next steps. This is how we're breaking it down. These are the people we're talking to. This is the meetings we're going to be having. This is how we're dealing with it. These personality types. And then it's laid out and they go, oh yeah, that's a better plan. And I go, okay, let's execute that plan. They don't,
I think that's a
people
great,
don't
great way
plan.
to say it.
People
Yeah.
don't plan. And I think if they just emotionally deal with situations, and that's where, and it's not just dentists, this is everyone. If you're not planning, you're just emotionally dealing with situations. So like you're reacting to a situation, and this happens a lot of like just in life. I think people react and they tell themselves this. Brene Brown always says, I tell myself a story, right? And so I worked under this at Corporate Dental. I worked under this CFO. And I'd be like, I would be like, I feel like we should go this direction. She's like, stop feeling anything. She's like, tell me what you want and tell me how you're going to get there and show me the data. And so I was like forced to learn how to prove that my plan was going to work. And not that my feelings were wrong, because I had been in dentistry long enough to know that my gut feeling was right and predictable. But she made me grow as far as like, you show me the data and show me the operations and show me how you're going to get there. And so then I started taking emotion out of everything. I never felt anything. It was like, and then I started teaching the people with me. I'm like, oh, this is a great idea. I love that you feel this way. And I think it probably will work. Let's back it up with some data. How are we going to support that? What are the plans? Let's work it through. And when we started doing those kind of things, we were able to see way higher results. The dentist was able to have way more confidence in the goal. We were able to execute better. We were able to predict the reactions of other people better, the other team members, and then able to mitigate risk accordingly with either culture, team members, clinical stuff. So like even if we're expanding into practice, I was like, oh, you only want to build 2 chairs because like if we double production and hygiene right now, which you're on track to be doing, you might want to buy 4 now because by the time we get those 2 chairs in, you're going to need 2 more. And
Yeah.
there's things like that where we can prove it with numbers, right? Because we have the analytics to do it and the projections to do it and the target to do it and the operational plan to succeed.
Well, you bring up my favorite topic, which is analytics. I use an app on my phone called Caralytics, and it taps into my practice software. And we should get the founder of Caralytics on here, Akil, my homie Terrace. He's amazing. He taps into my practice, and he spits out all these ratios, half of which I don't know why they mean.
Yeah.
They're all KPIs that we should be looking at. And I track them pretty closely, especially my own numbers, like to see how I'm doing, my own goals. I want to grow every year, every quarter, obviously. But what are your favorite analytics? Like right when you go into a practice, what are you looking at right away? And what do you like track going forward?
So it depends on the where the practice is sitting and like the development of the practice, that which ones we look at essentially. But we'll just say for like general practices that have been established for a little while, some of the things I look at is how many overdue patients are unscheduled. So like what's going on in the hygiene program? What's your pre-booking rate like? We look at how the
When you mean
ratio between
pre-booking, do you mean like hygiene reappointments? So like how many people are okay.
yeah. Yeah, what's your pre-booking ratio? We look at the ratio of hygiene to dentistry to see if it's swinging one direction or another. We'll look on production per hour as obviously a dead ringer if we can get that number off the get. We will break that down by provider as well to see if it's like an underperforming provider versus just an overall average. We'll break down anything operational. Analytics is really it. So once we get heavy into like the business side, kind of maybe down the road, we'll look at staff costs, we'll look at dental supply ratios, we'll look at just overall production and where it's sitting comparatively to historical data. And then we'll add some things, and then we'll look at where they projected and were they meeting their targets if they had projections as well.
So one thing I find interesting about dentistry in particular is everyone, Nike always says this, and it always sticks with me. It's, we're all on our own little lonely islands, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know where you stand, relative to, forget about the dentist across the street, like relative to Canadian dentists? How do you know if you're overpaying for staff? How do you know if you're overpaying for supplies? How do you know if you're underpaying for staff? How do you get that information?
Well, you could ask people like me, and we usually have it. We can give you overall averages.
But how do you get them?
How do we get them? So we have like our clinics we track across Canada as well. And then when we were in corporate dental, there are sets of benchmarks that are kind of laid out for Canadian. And you can usually, there's a few companies out there will give you overall Canada benchmarks. So like Recall Max is one of them that tells you across Canada what your benchmark should be at. There's other companies that are like, if you're analytic companies, they'll tell you what the Canadian ratio is in regard to what's happening in other practices. What I find though is people get sucked into the numbers and they think, oh, well, across Canada, I'm sitting at this ratio and I'm here, but the numbers tell a story. And it's really, really important that people understand that the numbers are just numbers and they will tell a story on the way they're laid out. So if you're looking at the numbers and you're freaking out because you don't think they're average to Canada, then you have to just kind of decide what's good for you. What are you working towards? How are these numbers reflecting the practice that you're in and your goals? Because I have dentists that they're like boutique practices and they do crazy amounts of dentistry. They don't really have a huge hygiene program. They don't want a huge hygiene program. It's a boutique practice. They're getting referrals from other dentists to do certain things. So they're going to see a lot higher ratio of production in dentistry than hygiene. Well, that's not going to match the Canadian average, right? We're also going to see practices that are massive hygiene practices that have 2 dentists, but their hygiene program has just been so developed that the hygiene ratio is going to be off the charts, but their dentistry is not going to be great because they don't put a lot of effort in dentistry. Dentists don't want to do a lot of dentistry. They want the hygiene program to make money and they'll just do what they want to do. So those numbers have to reflect the story that you want them to reflect. And so numbers are just numbers. They're just data. They're just markers, and they have to be able to tell you, and you have to use them as tools to get what you want out of them. And you have to be able to design those numbers and track them in a way that gets you where you want to be long term. So that's
Theresa,
not the great answer.
What I'm having a hard time, this is just me like being fascinated about just hearing you talk. You're dealing with with people that are paying you for a service to which a number will never be enough. So like, yeah, like say your goal is X, say it's $100,000 increase in production over 2023. Okay.
Yeah.
You're going to hit that 100,000. And then the dentist is going to be like, well, why wasn't it 120?
Yep. That happens all the time.
It does. And that's
Yeah.
just human nature, because what you have when you're talking about numbers will never be enough.
Yeah.
And I think that's human nature. Like whatever we do is, say our goal was 6 gold medals. Well, why didn't I get the 7th? You know what I mean? Like, why did I lose over here? Even though I won all these huge wins over here, I lost this one thing here. How do you deal with that?
That is exactly why we goal set. So we do those goal sets in the beginning so we can track and manage our emotions so that we don't get hung up on the little things that don't really matter. And like I was saying before, we had that dentist that was like mad because his staff costs went up 1%, but he made more money that month. He made $30,000 more dollars that month that went literally into his pocket. And he was mad because 1% of his staff costs went up. That was negated by the EBITDA in his pocket. So that's how we focus on it. And that's how we retain that happiness, because we're looking at things logically and not with emotion, right? We're saying, oh, this is the number. Don't freak out about this number because it's just telling part of the story. We're not hyper focusing on one point. We're hyper focusing on the entire picture. These numbers tell a story. And you literally took the sign, like one sentence in the middle of the story that said this person died, but like you didn't read the entire story, where maybe they came back to life later in the story. You don't know. Is this a science fiction story, or is this, like you don't know what's happening because you read one sentence of the story. And so we always talk about the bigger picture with numbers. We talk about building out a plan with the numbers, and also another thing about the numbers is you get results into the numbers by the people you work with. And so you need to be careful about how hard you're pushing those numbers, because those numbers are, people essentially.
Yeah, there's people.
If you don't get those numbers.
You're dealing with dentists though, and dentists are counting the pennies and watching the dollars fly by. I think that's the typical micromanager dentist. And I think we all have a little bit of that in us. I'm going to save 37 cents on this bottle of Bond by buying it from this company. And yet I'm going to waste 4.5 hours trying to find how I'm going to save 37 cents on this bottle of Bond. It's like, I think that's very common in our profession, no?
Yes. Oh yeah. It's being taught and handed down through mentorship, which I find disconcerting. So it's like, because one dentist did it and I worked for one dentist and he's really successful, of this image of this person that seems to be really successful, but you don't know, what that person has in their bank account. You don't know what that person's lifestyle is really like. You just have this image. Yeah. You just have this image of this very successful dentist. And let me tell you, I've looked under the hood of a lot of practices. Not always a wonderful engine under there. It may look really great from the outside, but it's not always a wonderful place. And so we have to really think about those goals and staying focused on what's good for you. And yes, you're in this bubble, but sometimes you need to just stay in your own bubble. It's like too much social media can ruin you, right? Because then you're like, oh, I'm not this fit. Oh, I could be better dressed. Oh, this person's on vacation all the time. I could be on vacation all the time. Oh, this person's a YouTube star. They're living their best life. If you're on social media constantly and you're filling your brain with all the things that you want and could have, how are you going to be happy? You can't be happy because you're so focused on so many things that aren't going to make you happy. So
you're totally right. I think it's so easy to get distracted in dentistry because you have so much going on, right? Like, I'm in dental school and I feel like half the time I'm like, I don't even know where my brain's at. I can't imagine, Neki or any other practicing dentist that has, patients, staff, paying the bills, then your whole personal life. And you're so right in giving that advice of, let's make sure we're looking at the right number. But, just in the context of costs, it's, my number one pet peeve is when people watch gas prices. And I'm not being insensitive. I'm not being, a jerk, but it's like, okay, it's almost like equivalent to when people try to get rich by not buying coffee, right?
Yeah.
It's like, that's not your issue, right? It's like, let's get the coffee out of the way. You're going to drink coffee regardless, but like, let's focus on the other side of the equation. And just, the same way in dentistry, Neki said bond, like any dentist can tell you the gas price that particular day and how it went up 0.1 of a cent, but they have no idea the thousands of dollars they're letting go because they don't have the right, financial structure. They're not watching their interest costs, or they're not watching, so this stuff really matters. And to your point, focusing on the right numbers is totally the right thing to do.
Yeah. And I think that comes back to like the conversation I was having before of like, you're keeping your thumb on your practice, but you're aligning your goals long term. And I think the people who are focused on their business and their exit strategy find better success because they're constantly working towards a goal. So like if you're financially, it's like when I was in high school, which was a while ago, but when I was in high school, my high school math teacher, who I hated, says to me one day, he's like, you're not really going to grow up to do anything. Like you don't pay attention in class, and you're not really good at math. And I think I passed math with like a 52 or something. I was like, look, but I love math. I love math, but I hated the teacher. Like I absolutely hated him. But I was like, oh, that's so like crushing as a teenager to hear that. And I went through that whole like for a while, I was just like, I just don't understand where I want to be. I just don't know what I'm doing. And then as I kind of went through that whole process, I realized, oh, I actually love math. And he was telling me in this, I couldn't even hear it from him, but he was saying in this math class, if you started saving now at 18 years old, $100 a month, by the time you're 40 years old, you could retire just with compound interest rates where we're sitting at the time. And I was like, that guy's a load of crap, right? I don't know, whatever. Like he's garbage, right? But now I look back and think, I should have freaking put $100 a month away. He's like, because I'm 40 now and I'm still working. But that's essentially it, right? Like I think that if you're planning for it and you have an exit strategy and you are prepared at a younger age to get out of it sooner, then when you're working, you work for fun. You work for the things that you want to do versus working for the things that you don't want to be doing. And getting that eye on the prize and evaluating yourself too. Like, are you looking, like you look at your numbers quarterly, you said, Neki. So you're looking at your numbers quarterly to see if you made your next target, right? But are you looking at your goals quarterly? And another thing, just on top of that,
we don't have goals. The goal is I'm just going to, do the most amount of dentistry I can. And that's my goal.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's not a bad goal. It's not a bad goal if it's performing.
No.
Right?
I know exactly. I'm being an idiot.
But at the same time, you're looking at, I was talking to an accountant this week and I said, okay, how many people are you having meetings with your AGMs or like are you having meetings after you give them your slip of like your P&Ls? And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, all right, you have meetings. Like, well, I meet with them for an hour and a half or something after every P&L has been delivered. And I said, okay, cool. What are they doing about their P&Ls? And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, they just look at them and then their eyes glaze over because you talk numbers at such a high level. They don't understand what's happening. Then what happens? And he's like, oh, I don't know. I was like, does anything change over the year? He's like, no. I was like, do they ask you questions? He's like, no. And I was like, so like most dentists aren't even engaged on like where they hit targets and they're not focused on where they're going. It's those golden handcuffs that Akil was saying that they just like, oh, I'm making money, so it's okay. I live the life that I do, so it's okay. But they could be far better off and retire earlier because when you get to that 10, 15 years in dentistry, you're going to want to retire because you're tired. You're tired of the mental stress. And that's why so many people end up selling into corporate at that range because build up a practice and then they're like, I'm done. I'm tired of managing. I'm tired of dentistry. I just want to be a dentist and do what I do.
You're going to kill me.
I thought you had a question.
Oh no, I got so many questions. Theresa, we'll have to edit that part out. Yeah. Hey, Theresa, I'm really fascinated by how you go into a practice. So I've never really had a practice consultant come into my practice. I have two other partners. It sounds like what you're doing is like, 1 quarter life coaching, 1 quarter, making you the best dentist you could be, and 1/2 let's bring the practice to the next level. So like when you come into a practice, are you working with each of the partners, or are you just working with like whomever hires you? And like that's the part I'm a little confused about. Like, how do you build the whole practice and all the partners up while they all have individual goals?
So it depends on how like the structure is and who wants to
Yeah.
participate. So we can design pathways in regards to whoever wants to engage. And then the people who don't want to engage, we just kind of let them know and communicate what's happening in the practice. They give their 2 cents, and then we say, okay, this is the way we're going to go. Is that good? And then we work around it and just kind of push things forward. There's some things that have to be like obviously amended or dealt with in regards to partnerships. Like not every partner is engaged as another partner for sure. Like some partners are on the exit out. Some partners are just like, I'm happy, I'm satisfied. Like, I don't want to push anything. So we're just work through those situations, kind of discuss what's going on. And then, yeah, we just kind of work through it. It's typically about communication and going through that process. If there is a partner that wants to hire me that's, separate from them, we just focus on that partnership and what they have control of. And then they can bring stuff to the table as well to the other partners and say, hey, like I have this idea. Do you think you want to be a part of it or no? And then we just work around it.
That's really interesting, because like I have 2 partners that I could ask, hey, what's your production per hour? And they will look at me saying, how do you even find out that info? And then there's me being like, boom, my production per hour is this in September 2021. And now here I am in, June 2023, and it's risen by 34.4%, blah, 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 blah. Like, to me, I find analytics really important, because it gives you the map of where you're going. And like you said, like where you want to be. Right. And so I was just always interested, like, how do you work with teams? Because teams are like, some people have kids and other businesses that they're a part of. And no, it's really interesting. On average, okay, just because I know there's a wide variety of questions, how does a dentist, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, how does a practice compensate a practice coach? Like, how does that happen? Like,
You
what is that
mean
based
like on it? We just have a set fee that we put in. So it's just like a set monthly fee. And it just is in regards to how much services we're providing for the practice. For me, it's we have different levels of practice in clinic support. So we either come in weekly, we do it bi-weekly, or we do it maintenance, which is just once a month, or we do quarterly reports. So we meet with them every 3 months, and then so there's just different price ranges for each stage of what they're looking for, and they can usually drop up and down as they need. So like we have dentists that drop down over the summertime because they just don't need as much in summertime because they're gone, team's gone, whatever, and then they pick back up in the fall when they're back full throttle. And we just are pretty flexible for that. So it's just a month-to-month cost, and we just kind of work through it. So we're pretty chill that way.
I think dentists have a hard time, like they're scared of how much the practice consultant or coach costs, because we're counting the pennies and watching the dollars fly by. And I think that's a common conception or common piece of information that I get from all my friends. Like, hey, I really want to hire a practice coach, but I can't afford that. And I'm like, well, how much do they cost? And they're like, I don't know. But
because they're too scared to ask the question. They're 100%
scared to ask the question, right?
Yeah.
And come on, you know what I'm talking about. You got to hear this all the time, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
so I just want to clear the air and just say, like, if you hire the person, well, don't tell me how much you charge, but like when you hire the person,
or do
you expect to get a multiple on your investment, right? Like, I don't know. I just think it's crazy. I look forward. I think I need a practice consultant. I feel like I do well, but I always want to do better. And that's why I go to, I was just at my counselor yesterday, and I'm like, why am I such an idiot? But like, I always make mistakes still, you know what I mean? And so I feel like I'm a successful practice owner. Like, I feel even anyone can use a practice coach. So I'll call you up, Theresa. I'll call you up.
Yeah, we do. Our coaching is like at different levels for different stages. So if someone's not high producing, we have not high producing support. So that's the thing, is I know that what it costs, and I know how much it costs to run a dental practice. I literally look at those numbers all the time. And I'm also the first person that's going to say, you're overspending here, you're underspending here, what's going on? Like, we need to be watching these numbers. I am a very frugal person. So we have not overcharged for what our services are, because I'm also very Scottish. And I feel like no, everyone should have value that they're getting, but without having to pay through the nose for it. So, and again, we're not traditional, so you're getting a lot of like hands-on support versus being just told what to do and handed a booklet. We're going to work through those situations with you and deal with the stuff that's happening, which is I personally think it's a better quality service, because you're able to have someone in your corner to like, I just need to talk to you about what's going on.
Lisa, one more thing I want to ask you.
Yeah.
And it's a thing that's been on my mind the whole time. So I paid a dietitian to basically look at every single thing I ate for many months, right? Because I have zero self-control. Neki can relate to this. Yeah, Neki can relate to this.
He's got his hands in the all dressed chips, man. It's
exactly like I don't put my hands on the screen, because they're I'm definitely munching on something. But I paid a diet coach to basically look at my meals every single day, review them, send me like a report at the end of the day. Okay, this is where you're at. This is where you want to be. You're overeating here. You're undereating here. And, obviously he was expensive, right? Because you're paying a registered dietitian every single day to look at everything you eat. And I asked him, his name's Paul. And I was like, Paul, man, this is great. I really appreciate what you've done for me. But how do I make sure you don't become a crutch for me for the rest of my life? Because one, I don't want to keep doing this, because this really sucks. I don't want to have to, get fat shamed every night. And two, quite frankly, I don't think I can afford this forever, right? It's really expensive. So how do you make sure that you, for your clients, don't become just a crutch that they can rely on, just so, there's a fee involved, and just to make sure that, that fee doesn't remain there forever?
Yeah, so that's why we allow the drop down in service as they grow. So as we teach people how to manage their own practices, or teach managers to help manage that practice better, they can drop down and wean off. I know that like cold turkey is like not great, because that usually just drops off really hard, and then the dentist ends up getting like, well, it's like when you're on diet and you're really good, you work out, and then you drop off, and then you gain all your weight back. That's what happens in dental. Yeah, it happens a lot in dental. So consultant leaves, and then everything goes back to the way it was, because there's no one keeping things on target. So there are going to be some people that are never going to be able to take someone completely out, because if they're not having someone do it, they just won't do it at all. But we have a very low fee charge just to make sure that things are staying on target. And it's reasonable. It's like 2 hygiene visits, guys. 2 hygiene visits will pay for that cost. So you can do your numbers in your head, to just make sure. And that's that quarterly report. So every 3 months, it's a 3-hour session, and we go through top to bottom everything that's happening in the practice, and set targets, and figure out where you're at, and just go through the whole process. But there's that session, right, to keep people, just making sure they're not losing momentum. And then that's why we have training sessions. That's why we have the training whole side of our business, is because we don't want to keep clients forever. I do not want to have to deal with the same problem over and over and over again. So we fix the problem, we teach them how to gain momentum from it, and then we teach them how to manage it long term. And then we slowly step away, and now that team is managing that practice. And then if they need us to do another transition, we pop in, do the transition, reorganize a little bit, because that happens a few times as you grow and scale, and then step back out. They manage their own. We just say, keep our finger on the pulse and say, okay, how's it going? What's happening with the targets? Are you where you want to be? And then that's it. So they kind of just like pop us on and off as needed.
Theresa, I think I could talk to a practice consultant coach about my practice all day and night. But no one else wants to hear that, but I really appreciate you coming on here. Thank you for being our first practice coach, consultant, whatever you are. guest on our podcast, where can everyone reach you?
Yeah, so you can find us at optimizeddental.ca. You can find us at sign Optimized Dental on like LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. So all the major socials that most people use, we're there. And then we have a YouTube page as well. So there's Optimized Dental, which has a lot of great learning stuff. So we run a study group for office managers, and you can go on there, and all of them get recorded and put on our YouTube channel for people to like refer back to. A lot of great information there from a lot of great people that are really, really smart. Because obviously I'm not the smartest person with an awesome math grade of 52, but I am smart when it comes to this portion, just not all of the things that require dental. So we rely on a lot of other people and advice. That what's make a great support team for us. Obviously, we have different people in our pockets that are going to help our practices grow. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I feel so honored to be a part of this, and I am so grateful for your office manager for reaching out when she was at the course and connecting us as well. This has been delightful. It was really lovely to meet you guys.
This is wicked. Thank you so much. We will we'll have you back on again in the future. Hope everyone has a great night.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome to the Hi, I'm Neki. Is that a sweater?
Yeah, dude, it's the Hi, I'm Doctor sweater. Oh, dude, I see you got yours on too. Looking sharp, bro.
Dude, where'd you get yours from?
It was super easy, man. I just went on to our website, www.hiimdoctor.com. That's HIIMDR.com.
We have a website. We must be raking in cash from selling these sweaters.
Dude, we are killing it. I mean, if that includes losing money on every single sweater that we make, I think we're doing really well.
Yeah, Neki and I are donating all proceeds, which is zero, to charity because we are losing money.
I wonder if the charity will pay us. I think we got something here, man. Let's keep on keep on losing money on every sweater.
Alrighty, guys, go check us out. HiI'mDoctor.com.
We'll see ya.